he's doing here. Brand.
TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
2,000 years long, we will never settle. Hard days, no way, with a heavy metal. No time, no fail, won't stop here. Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot. Won't stop, come on, take me higher.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and it's that time of the week for the Tea Time Wagers with good friend, colleague, Mr. Brady Kannon at the BMW Championship, week number 2 of the FedEx Cup. I could talk for a long time but I won't. I already delayed us a few minutes. Apologies for a few minutes behind. But, you know, I'm on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So when you look at the map, I'm that island with the arm flexing over here. And Brady's on the West Coast in Las Vegas. And 3,000 miles away, let's just say. On Sunday, I could feel the pain, the ups, the downs, the sweat of just trying to will MATSUYMA home. And as we've discussed on the show, I left my dad at the Masters after the 9th hole on the Greg Norman collapse. And again, I'm not comparing the two, but when you're so invested and you're so rooting for that one person and you see the wheels coming off and you're like, it's like a Rocky movie. You're trying to get him up, get up. And Brady's going to go through this, but hats off to Brady Kannon and all the followers here on the pre-flop victory in the first week of the FedEx Cup. I have the updated numbers to win the Cup for the overall, which we'll get into, and the rest of it. So first and foremost, a shout out to our two sponsors, WagerWire. If you haven't downloaded the app, please head on over to Google Play. I promise you it will be one of the most used apps starting next week and throughout 2024 and beyond. And of course, Viva Tequila Seltzer. Shout out to CT Bets and the rest of that team. Go grab yourself a brand new flavor coconut. Trust me, you will love it. And the best producer, hands down, no debate, TKO himself, Mr. Noah Frank. So without further ado, let's bring in the star of this show, Mr. Brady Kannon.
Mr. Dawson, good to be with you once again. And you're right, that was a great story there about being able to feel the nerves from the other side of the country. And you're right. And, you know, the kiss of death. You and I talked about this a long time ago. I think it was last year. We had a guy that was getting ready to cash a ticket for first round leader. And you texted me, you said, here we go. And I said, no, don't talk. and sure enough, I had just left my brother-in-law and sister-in-law in Southern California, and I'm on the plane, and I text to him, I got, Hideki with, 5 shots up with seven holes to go. And then I see it, and I go, oh my gosh, I did it to myself. I spoke too soon. And so I'm really feeling guilt about that. And then I was also thinking, I wonder if you felt the exultation, the fist pump and the scream when he holed the putt on 17. You probably felt that as well from across the country. Boy, they're never easy, man. Yeah, and like I say, 5 shots up was 7 to play, and almost gave it away. At one point, wasn't in the lead. Thank you very much. I sent part of the winnings to Victor Hovland for missing a couple putts down the stretch there. But no, all kidding aside, hey, it made for some great theater, but probably took about a year or so off my life as well.
And they say that's why we play the games. That's why we get invested. That's why we do what we do. And it's almost like when I used to tune in every Saturday when we were kids to the Wide World of Sports, the theme, the entrance of that, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat and the swoons. And we talk about golf, and there's no better. You get 4 days of action. You get 4 days of thrills, spills. And if you're not involved, get involved. Golf, I think, is one of the sports, Brady, that actually the sports betting world is just getting its feet wet. I mean, I know there's some places that you can bet on every hole, which I know for me is a little too excessive. But when you talk like we do every Wednesday here at 5 o'clock, and you make your analysis on the pre-flop. You talk about the top 20s. You talk about the head-to-heads. Hey, and if you really need to scratch an itch that bad, you can sprinkle the fairways and do some first-round leaders. So there's a million ways to dive into these tournaments.
Oh, you're no doubt about it. I mean, I think golf betting has probably been the biggest growing sport in the sports betting world for at least, I want to say probably 20 years, and maybe you go 30 years. But I really started getting into it. I remember the first future I ever hit. And I came to Las Vegas in 1994. I was not that familiar with sports betting prior to arriving in Las Vegas. I started to get into playing like fantasy golf in the late 90s, 96, 97, 98, 99, that type of thing, early 2000s. I probably played for about a 6-7 year stretch there. And that's really how I started to learn about handicapping golf. To this day, I think back about what I learned about horses for courses. These certain guys always play well at the same tracks. We played in a fantasy league where, there was roughly 40 tournaments throughout the PGA Tour season, and you earned points by how much money, just like a one and done league that you have going on these days. The big difference was we had to pick all 40 guys. You could not duplicate. You could not pick the same guy twice. And you had to fill out your entire season's card before they teed off at Kapalua in January. So you had to go back and find out, okay, who's going to show up, who does well here. First of all, who's going to show up? Second of all, who does well here? And so you really had to find, historical trends about who typically does well at the Travelers and who typically does well at Colonial. I learned a ton about golf handicapping, doing that 25, 26, 30 years ago. But then I started to get into being in Las Vegas, betting on the majors. And I would throw a couple bucks on Freddie Couples, one of my favorite players at the Masters, and got him into the final pairing twice at 100 to 1 or whatever he was. But the first future I ever hit was 1999, Payne Stewart at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. And I think he was 25 to 1. And so since then, I think for me personally, golf betting has grown for me. And of course, sports betting has grown quite a bit since then. But I think if you had to track it, even if you went to a sports book, you go to a DraftKings, you go to a Circa, a Westgate. Circa hasn't been around that long, but a Westgate, a BetMGM, whatever it is. I gotta believe golf is right there as far as that. The chart, rising continuously year after year, and then it really caught kind of a second wind during COVID. You remember when, everybody was locked down and there was nothing to do. The only thing you could bet was table tennis, UFC, and, Russian table tennis or whatever, UFC and golf. And I remember seeing a lot of people on Twitter. All of a sudden there was guys that I'd seen college, handicapped college football and everything. I turned around one day and they were all of a sudden golf experts. I went, wait, what? And, they had to find something to do. So, but no, you're right. I mean, and like you said, there's so many, really hundreds of different ways you can bet golf, and it's my friend Keith Stewart, who appears quite a bit on Sports Grid. He calls it the 4-day lottery ticket. You can buy a 50 to 1, you can buy 100 to 1, whatever, and for 4 days, and sometimes that ticket's live right down until the bitter end.
Well, I'm going to give you some updated odds here. This is on DraftKings here. Scotty Scheffler minus 125. Xander plus 275. He's come down from 4 to 1. Hideki moves up to 12 to 1. Colin Morikawa 14 to 1. Rory to 16 to 1. Wyndham Clark at 3,000. Oberg is now down to 4,000, and I'll leave it at Cantlay at 5,000. Go back to last year as Hovland got hot at the right time, and here comes Victor, just bing bang boom. Do you get that feeling with Matsuyama? I mean, Xander was right there, Scheffler's right there, Rory lurking, Colin lurking. The Wyndham Clark thing just blows my mind. I swear I'm going to go into a time travel and he's going to all of a sudden wake up and win the next 2 weekends. And I'm going to go back to last week when I brought him up because he doesn't even deserve, I think, to be in this conversation.
Yeah, he is very interesting. And Patrick Cantlay is really interesting too. He and Victor Hovland, the guy just shows up around FedEx season, doesn't he? But Hideki becomes a very interesting proposition because you've already kind of got a leg up. I mean, he's got 1 foot, in the door. He's up to third on the list. If he goes into next week at East Lake in third position, he's going to be 4 shots behind, presumably, Scotty, who will be in the number 1 position. It was a huge dip for Rory McIlroy last week, finishing second to last, and went from that third position to that 5th position. That's huge. In third position, you're probably 4 shots off the pace, because of the staggered scoring system. If Scotty's number 1, whoever that number 1 in the FedEx Cup points is, at East Lake next week, they're going to start out, before they even put a peg in the ground, they're going to start out at 10 under par. The second place guy is going to start out at 8 under par. And I don't think they've changed it. This is what they've done for the past half a dozen years or so. The guy in third place starts out at 6 under par, then you go to 5 and 4, blah, blah, blah. So, Rory probably cost himself, 3 or 4 shots by dipping down to the 5th position there. So, at the top, it gets pretty dicey. But you've got, and you said Hideki at 12 to 1. That's pretty good price for a guy that's right there in third. And who knows, maybe could get to number 2 before we get to next week. I've been preaching about Xander forever, because Xander is the king of East Lake. He plays that golf course better than anybody in the world. The only guy he's just slightly ahead of is Rory. Rory and Xander are the horses for the courses at East Lake, and Xander slightly better. But now that number's come down. I saw it at 4 to 1, and I was like, wow, what a tremendous number that is. Now it's kind of back to where it was. Yeah, I saw as low as plus 250. Now you mentioned plus 275. 4 to 1 is a really good price. But I've also come to find out, I didn't know this, I'll certainly find out when I get into my research next week, but I've heard that there have been some changes to East Lake Golf Club. Now, I don't know if these are wholesale changes. I don't believe that they are, but maybe this course is not so perfectly set up for Xander with some of the tweaks that they've made. We will see. But I still think if you can find 4 to 1, he's an extremely good bet to win the entire FedEx Cup.
Well, as you can hear, the dogs are barking in the background. That might be an omen. Apologies here. I have this week's odds up in front of me. Scotty at plus 300, Xander at 550, Rory at 12 to 1, Colin at 14 to 1, Cantlay 16 to 1, Victor 18 with Matsuyama at 18, Oberg rounds it out at 2,000, and there's that guy, Wyndham Clark, and Tony Finau, and Tommy Fleetwood at plus 2,500. Obviously, we're going to get you front stage for the breakdown and your selections here. Anything kind of stick out just from the board, say a number that looks a little out of place this week?
Well, I find it weird that Patrick Cantlay is shorter than Matsuyama. And I know Cantlay's getting a lot of love here. He is, let's see, it's Cantlay and Morikawa, I believe. 1 and 2, it's between those two guys that have the best record on tour at Jack Nicklaus designed golf courses. And that's what we have here this week at Castle Pines. And Cantlay's been playing a lot better, really been a lot better since the US Open, but he still has not had a great year. He's won the BMW Championship before. So, it's kind of like Hovland, where it's his time of the year. So I can understand people gravitating towards Patrick Cantlay. He made sense for me this week as well. And I started diving into it, and I went, wait a minute, and this was the killer. I started to, I said he's getting very popular. I'm seeing this Cantlay getting floated around out there, and you know how it is, Jeff. We don't like to be on somebody that's too popular. And then it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I looked on my William Hill app, and there was a boost on Patrick Cantlay to get him all the way up to 21-1 to win the BMW. And I said, there you go. I'm completely off now. Not jumping in on any boost that a sports book is offering. So he became a guy that was on and quickly off my list in a hurry. Wyndham Clark is, people are just kind of leaning on the fact that he grew up in Colorado and has played here before. And I know he's been playing better, but I don't want to go there either. He's also been extremely popular. My article's now up at PGAtour.com, again, under the heading Golf Bet, the Prop Farm. And you'll see where I speak with a number of bookmakers. And those three guys that you mentioned, Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, and Wyndham Clark are all very popular plays being supported heavily by the public. And sometimes the public's right. They've been right a lot about Scotty Scheffler, 7 times this year already. But I did not want to get involved with any of those guys. And like I say, Hovland is interesting. Hovland's also been very, very popular. One of the biggest liabilities at BetMGM Sportsbooks. And it's understandable. He plays well this time of year. He was great last week. And he does worry me a little bit because, those two factors. He seems to be finding his form. And this time of the year seems to be Victor Hovland's season. But again, you know how it is. As sports bettors, we're typically better off if we're in the minority, if we're contrarian, if we're trying to zig when everybody else zags. And hey, there's only 50 players in the field. And I said it earlier this week, realistically, maybe there's only 30 that can truly win this week. So when you reduce the field to, let's say, 30 guys, there's going to be some crossover. You're going to have the sharpest guys in the world on the same guys that 90% of the public is on. So, some of that theory can be thrown out the window when you reduce the field size and you get that, that cream of the crop of 10 to 15 guys that no matter what kind of bettor you are, professional, recreational, or somewhere in between, you're going to have some crossover.
Shout out to Stuart Bunting, Mr. Sean Kroll, a.k.a. The Kitchen. Thank you guys so much for watching and trusting in us throughout. It is that time of year, the last 2 weeks of this year's regular season, and then we kind of tiptoe through the tulips, and next thing you know, full-time football, and everyone's going to forget about golf. Everyone's going to forget about baseball till we get the call on Sunday afternoon to talk it on Sports Grid, correct?
That's exactly right. I got you represented here behind me this week.
I think it's amazing. I might have to give them a phone call. I saw it when we were talking backstage. I was like, holy cow, very impressive, and very jealous back here on Cape Cod. So, BMW Championship, course evaluation. You got all your notes. You got everything there. What'd you see, Brady?
Well, it is Castle Pines Golf Club in Castle Rock, Colorado. We have not seen this course on the PGA Tour since 2006. It was a couple of decades that this was the home to the International, which I'm sure you remember. I always was really excited for this tournament. They played the modified Stableford scoring system, and all you mentioned Greg Norman, all the guys were there, and in the thin air at 6,300 feet above sea level, and just bombing the golf ball. And the terrain of Colorado, which is maybe, in my opinion, the most beautiful state in the union. It was just really fun to watch this golf tournament, a different brand of golf than we were used to seeing. And now here we are back again in 2024 at Castle Pines, and I'm really excited to see it once again because it's something different. It's the longest course ever to host an event on the PGA Tour at over 8,100 yards. Now, that sounds like a lot, but at 6,300 feet, it's going to play more like 7,400, 7,500, and at a par 72, that's fairly standard. So obviously these guys are going to launch the ball a lot further at that type of elevation, and everything will kind of even out. But it's going to be fun, and it's going to take a while for these guys to adjust. Not only do you have the elevation, but you've got a lot of elevation change. You might start on a tee box that's 100 feet elevated over the fairway. So think about that. Trying to gauge the altitude along with that drop off. I believe total driving is going to be a very important point of emphasis this week. You've got to hit it long and straight, because if your judgment is off and you're not hitting your tee ball square, you could get in a lot of trouble here. I think the winners are going to have that driver dialed in and find fairways and have that length. And then after that, you're going to have to adjust to a lot of approach shots that are going to come from 200 yards or better. And it's going to be a different club. You're not used, you're used to hitting at 250 yards. These guys are used to hitting a 4-iron. They're going to be hitting a 6 or a 7-iron. So that adjustment will be interesting as well. And because those adjustments have to be made into these smaller than average greens, they're going to miss these greens, and they're going to have to scramble. They're going to have to get up and down. So I think that's kind of your basic formula. Total driving, iron play, and scrambling, which usually works out pretty well at just about any golf course. But I think that's extra important here this week with this track. And it's hard to, because we haven't seen it since 2006, it's hard to really pinpoint too much. There's not any course history. 48 out of the 50 guys in this field have never played this course before in a competitive round. But I did, in my handicap, I used other Jack Nicklaus designs. We have, Sherwood Country Club, where they played the Zozo Championship in 2020. We have Valhalla, where they played the PGA Championship this year. And of course, year in and year out, we have Muirfield Village, where they play the Memorial. I also used courses that have been played in the past at elevation, and for a 4-year stretch, we saw a lot of guys in this field play the WGC Mexico at Chapultepec, which is actually higher, around 7,000 feet. So I kind of went with guys that do well at elevation, guys that do well at Nicklaus courses, and then looked at total driving and came up with four outright guys that I hope one of which is a winner this week, Jeff.
Before we get you front stage here for those outrights, do you think the books, they already know the big names, they know the following, they can get a gauge of how much money's going to be coming in, just like an NFL football game. One round, the eye test, if you noticed what you're looking for, if there's going to be a couple outliers, you think that you're going to trust the eyes, or for me, would I be able to trust the board? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess that's the $64,000 question, right? Week in and week out, I think market reading, I was thinking about this last night, is such an incredible skill. There's so many different facets of handicapping. I think I'm a really good handicapper, like breaking down a golf tournament or a football game. I can find a lot of little nuggets and angles and what makes sense and stats and numbers and gut feeling too, because I've been around it long enough. I don't think I'm the world's greatest bettor by any means. Some guys are really good at making the best positive EV bets and finding different markets where there's even a greater edge. And then there's guys that are really strong at reading the market. You have to try and do it all really well, correct? But I know some guys that are much better at reading the market than, and I would consider yourself, an extremely good market reader, especially in golf. You and I have talked throughout this show that, you're going into a Sunday or a Saturday and you can really glean a lot of clues with what the odds makers are dealing. This week, it could be a little different because the odds maker doesn't know the golf course really, just like we don't either. Our friend Jeff Sherman over at the Westgate, his winning score proposition bet this week, Jeff, is 22.5 under par. He's expecting a birdie fest. He's expecting these guys to get adjusted pretty quickly and tear this course apart. And I wouldn't be surprised. The modified Stableford scoring system, that was based upon guys being aggressive and trying to make birdie. And I think you're probably going to see more of it this week. But boy, and we can get into this in my analysis too. One of the guys I landed on this week is Justin Thomas. Okay, Justin Thomas, who I think is number 22 in the FedEx Cup points list. You can argue that correlates pretty well to the 22nd best player in the world. And he's 50 plus to win this week in a field of 50. So the numbers are interesting. So is that telling you that the odds makers don't think he has a chance? Scotty's always going to be 3 or 4 to 1. And I know he has the greatest amount of tickets, the greatest amount of handle, and the greatest amount of liability at BetMGM, followed by Xander Schauffele, followed closely by Victor Hovland. Those are number 1, 2, and 3 at BetMGM as far as ticket count, handle, and liability. I went a little bit further down. I found some guys. I thought the price was off on your guy, Rory McIlroy. And maybe it's off because of his finish last week. We talked about it, where he dropped a couple of spots in the FedEx Cup standings. He finished second to last. He finished 69th out of 70 players last week in Memphis. And he came out at 16 to 1. I even saw 17 to 1 on Rory. And I was like, again, in a field of 50, where maybe only 30 have a realistic chance to win, and you're going to give me Rory at 16? Okay, I'll buy. Sold. Thank you. So, yeah, I tried to do a little bit of market reading on a couple of my picks. It's a part of the overall handicap, and I thought that certain guys made sense to me. And then when I saw that their price felt a little juicier than maybe I felt it should be, that ultimately put me on them.
Well, it's that time that everyone's sitting here, standing room only, waiting for. So we're going to bring you front stage for your selections for your outrights in the BMW Championship.
Well, I'm going to go right there where I mentioned to the top of the board, not the very top of the board, but close to it with Rory McIlroy. And I mentioned, I think there's been a little bit of a drift in his price this week because he finished second to last week. You can also reference the fact that it's been a real roller coaster of a ride for Rory since the U.S. Open and since that incredibly disappointing runner-up finish at Pinehurst. But let's remember, he's also had 2 top 5 finishes since then. And I happen to think this particular golf course is really good for him. He is number 2 on the PGA Tour in total driving. And I just talked about that statistic. We've seen video of him this week. He's hitting it out there 400 yards. If he can find the fairways, he is going to have a massive advantage, I think, on this field with his distance and his ability to be accurate off the tee. He's going to have a lot of little flip wedges into some of these holes. If the putter gets hot, it's a good putting surface for him. He's had success. It's a primarily bent grass, about 70% bent grass and about 30% Poana. He's had success on this type of surface before. I think it was over the last 24 rounds on bent grass surfaces. He's 15th in this field for strokes gained putting. So I think Rory has a real good chance to bounce back off of that disappointing finish last week. He obviously knows that he slipped a couple spots in the FedEx Cup standing and wants to get right back on that horse this week. If you look at what he's done at some of the correlated courses, he's finished in the top 10 at the Memorial at Muirfield Village 5 times. He made 3 trips to Chapultepec for the WGC Mexico. He finished 7th, runner-up, and 5th. So it didn't take him long to adjust to 7,000 feet. He ought to be able to figure out 6,300. 12th at Valhalla earlier this season, a Nicklaus course. Of course, won there at Valhalla in 2014. Also, it was 2014 that the BMW Championship was here in Colorado again, about 17 miles down the road from Castle Pines at Cherry Hills. Also down about 1,000 feet in elevation, around 5,300 feet. McIlroy had a top 10 finish there, finished 8th. So he's been good in the state of Colorado. He's been good at elevation. He's been good at Nicklaus tracks. I thought McIlroy at 16-1 was a real nice price. We haven't seen him at that price in a while, and now you've got a field that's a third of the normal size, and he's 16-1. So I think Rory could have a big week. If you want to play him for a finishing position, I'd probably go top 10. I certainly wouldn't go top 20, but I might look at a top 10. Ludwig Oberg, this is the other guy that I thought his price was off a little bit at 25-1. And I mentioned McIlroy, number 2 on tour in total driving. Well, number 3 is Oberg. Drives it long and straight. And I love that combination this week. His last 3 starts, he's been a little bit off the boil. And I think that's why we're getting 25-1 rather than 18 or 20. His last 3 starts, he's been cut, 18th, and then 40th last week at TPC Southwind in Memphis. But if you go just prior to that, his 4 starts prior to that, 5th, 12th, 27th, and 4th. And that 5th place finish was at Muirfield Village, at Nicklaus's place. 3rd on tour in total driving, I mentioned. His last 24 rounds, he's 13th in this field for strokes gained approach, 18th for birdies or better gained, and 14th in hole proximity from 200 yards out or better. So I think he's got the game. I love the total driving aspect for Ludwig Aberg, and also I believe that price has drifted a little further than maybe normally it would be if he wasn't just off a tick the last few weeks. But I think he can get it right here on a golf course that could be right up his alley, and you like that price that is maybe a little juicier than I would have expected. And then I go with maybe the hottest man in golf right now, and that's Billy Horschel. We were on him last week, and I didn't play it, but if you played a top 10 or a top 20, he cashed again. He has 3 top 10 finishes in a row. His last 3 starts, you go back to the Open Championship where he was runner-up. So he's got a 2nd, a 7th, and a 10th. And then what he's done at Nicklaus courses. 6 times he's been top 15 at the Memorial, and that includes a win in 2022. He was 8th at Valhalla, another Nicklaus track, at the PGA Championship this year. He's really having maybe the best year of his entire career, except for maybe 2014. I mentioned Cherry Hills when we had the BMW Championship there. Who won that? Oh yeah, Billy Horschel, who went on to win the FedEx Cup that year. So Nicklaus, elevation, red hot current form, and got him at better than 50-1. And this was like an outlier price. I'm still seeing it at one book out there, but most books are dealing 40-1 or less. I think 40-1 is still completely fair. Obviously, if you can find any better than that, you want to jump on it. But 40-1 is probably about my base. I wouldn't want to go a whole lot lower than that, but hey, you might still buy it at 25. The guy, he checks a lot of boxes, and I think he's got a good shot this week. And then finally, Justin Thomas, just 4 outrights, a field of 50. Didn't want to get too aggressive here. We talked about Thomas a little bit earlier. Got him at 52-1. Justin Thomas, in a field of 50 players, 52-1. Is that the odds maker telling me he's got no shot? I think it could just be off pricing again. I saw him jump all the way to 54 and then saw him jump back to 50. And I've seen another book where he's been hit down to like 44. So I think there is some interest for JT out there, especially, people feeling that his price may have gotten a little bit too inflated. Okay, playing at elevation, WGC Mexico at Chapultepec. They played there 4 times between 2017 and 2020. Thomas has finished 5th, 2nd, 9th, and 6th. He crushed it there. 2 top 10 finishes at the Memorial. And in 2020, when they played the Workday Charity Open, if you remember, they had back-to-back weeks at Jack's Place there at Muirfield Village. He lost in a playoff to Colin Morikawa. So he's had tremendous success there. I mentioned Sherwood Country Club in Thousand Oaks, California. Again, COVID stuff, they switched the Zozo Championship over to that track. Another Nicklaus course. Thomas, finished runner-up. He's got the elevation. He's got the Nicklaus pedigree. And he hasn't been playing that poorly at all. He's finished like top 30 or better in his last 4 starts, hasn't missed a cut in a while. So I just thought the price and what he's got going, the boxes he checks, that Thomas makes some sense here too. Now with these prices, Billy Ho and JT being in the 50, 40 something to 1, you might play them top 20. If I was going to play finishing position markets, I'd probably play them top 20 and Oberg and McIlroy for a top 10.
Shout out to Brian Gaskell as he too says, let's go Billy Ho. And when I think of Billy Ho, it's like my all-time favorite movie, and White Man Can't Jump. And there's Woody Harrelson, Billy Ho. So it's intriguing. And you know I am the president of the Rory McIlroy fan club. And his season's on the line here because this is my take on it. Going back to the U.S. Open and 16 and 18, the 3-foot misses, takes a few weeks off. A potential divorce, comes back to the wife. Scottish Open, okay there. The U.S., the British Open, and then we take a look. Olympics. Now we're here last week. Colorado, thin air. I saw him, a few tweets out there and videos of him bombing him well over 400 yards. I think he's just going to grip it and rip it. Be aiming at sticks, and we'll know a lot about Rory early this week.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think I hate to play the real chalky guys for first round leader, but that could be where he goes. He might get out to, a real hot start. And I didn't play any. I might play, maybe tonight I'll be sitting there in bed and I want to throw a couple of bucks around on some guys because it's such a fun market to play. Maybe I'll land on Rory. I haven't done any research, but I could see that bounce back starting early and often on Thursday.
Well, we're super stoked. We're super excited. As we always close out here, the scroll has been going the whole time at Las Vegas Golfer, Golf Bet, PGA Tour, and of course, Sports Grid. Tell everyone where they can find your written work. They know where to find you on Twitter, and of course, your schedule at Sports Grid this week and weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. The first article that came out yesterday at golf.com, you can check that out. A thorough breakdown of the golf course, what I'm looking at, correlated courses, all that stuff, the outrights. And then, as I mentioned, at PGAtour.com under Golf Bet, you can find the Prop Farm article up there where I talk with bookmakers. A lot of very interesting information. You got to read between the lines there and where are the sharps and this and that and the other. I think you can certainly gain some insight from that article. And then, of course, Sports Grid. You see right there in the background, I got this fancy new background they sent me. I'm happy to have that. I'll be on there a little bit later at 7:30 Eastern time today, and then again at 10 p.m. Eastern time with Gabe. I'm not sure if Cam Stewart's around. Our guy, the Prime Minister, he might not. I had to fill in for him today earlier on Pharrell Coast to Coast, so I'm not sure if he's going to be there tonight for Gabe Morency's show, but I'll be there with Gabe for sure, talking a little more golf and maybe a little football as well. And speaking of football, Jeff, you and I were talking backstage before the show. I'm really, really excited. I've been working on this project for a few months now. As you know, I won the Westgate Super Contest in 2011. My good friend and colleague, we've done a lot of broadcasting with him, James Salinas, just an outstanding contest player. He won the Super Contest in 2015. And then another great friend of mine who I've also done a lot of NFL broadcast work with, Mike Pritchard, a number 1 draft choice, played in the NFL for 9 years. The three of us are teaming up for the Las Vegas Football Contest Show. And our first episode will be this Friday from Radio Row at the Circa Resort as a part of their Ultimate Contest weekend. We're thrilled to have the support of Circa and the Westgate Superbook. You can get it wherever you find all your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. We'll record every Friday afternoon during the regular season. We'll have 2 episodes prior to the season starting, and then every week throughout the regular season on Fridays, the three of us are going to team up and buy an entry into Circa Survivor, Circa Million, and the Super Contest at Westgate. and we're going to talk about our handicapping strategy and our process and how we came up with our picks and ultimately release our card on Fridays for the general public. So we're really looking, I mean, football's king, right? Well, now football contests are becoming so popular. We can't wait. We're thrilled to do it.
Well, I can't wait. That is definitely going to be a must-watch for me, and we'll make sure every week we get people over there. It's so exciting. The behind the scenes, the actual thought and the process. We talked backstage about the train wrecks, about the contests. You know, when you're competing against thousands and thousands, you don't want to be on that 40% game. Cincinnati week 1 against the Patriots, which we talked about. You want to root for the train wrecks, and then you want to say, hey, better luck next year as you move on. As we like to say, survive in advance, correct?
Absolutely. Survive in advance is exactly right. In fact, Bet Bash, you know, they've come along so progressively in the last few years. I've attended now the last 2 years, and this year it really felt like a legitimate conference. And that was in large part due to the fact all the seminars they had. They had, gosh, it felt like 25 or 30 or maybe 40 different seminars over the course of 3 or 4 days. And all of them were tremendously interesting topics and great speakers. And I went to one on Circa Survivor strategy. And boy, it's really interesting. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into my notes there from that seminar and see if I can turn it into a little cash.
Well, and about, 23 minutes, Scott Webb will be here in the batter's box breaking down tonight's MLB card. Make sure you go catch Brady at Las Vegas Golfer and, of course, on Sports Grid tonight and the rest of the week and weekend here. Super stoked and excited, not just for this week, week 2 of the FedEx Cup, but, of course, the final week next week at East Lake. You and I will be back here at 5 o'clock, and then, of course, all eyes will be on the podcast, and can't wait for the contests and your releases. So, for myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Mr. Brady Kannon at Las Vegas Golfer, we wish everyone here, shout out to Stewart, Sean Kroll, and, of course, Mr. Brian Gaskell, and many, many more, standing room only. We can't thank you guys enough. Have a great, great day. Let's cash some tickets and golf this week, and we will see you soon.